we are now. Welcome back to the workshop. So it's the next day in making this. God, I've been excited all week to actually film the next part of this video so that we can get going and make another bit of this. All week I was doing work on other customer stuff and I kept seeing this at the milling machine and was like, I'll just do a little bit. No, I kept it all for you guys. So here we are, where we got the last day to the stage where we had this sort of spinning on a truss bearing sitting here. Next thing we need to be able to do is, we had come up with the idea of the pillars to mount this to the puller, which I'm very happy with. A couple of people gave me some suggestions which I'm going to take to heart. One of those was that if the pillar coming up had a little bit of a taper on the end of it, so that it would sort of self-center. So rather than putting the taper on the bolt, like we were going to have the taper on the pillar so that it sort of self-centers. And I think that's actually a great idea. I'll do a little drawing on the whiteboard so that we all kind of get our heads in the same mindset when we're doing that. The second thing we need to be able to do is we need to be able to mount this rear wheel bearing in such a way here that we can get that load down to mount this whole thing really firmly to the vise, but still have that bearing capacity. So I found a bit of stock in the workshop that I thought might do it, but very, very tight on the top of the wheel bearing. It really would only allow the wheel bearing to sit on it. During the week, while I was doing another job, I was cleaning out a press and I found this hunk of junk. And I thought, haha, this is absolutely perfect for the job. Now I'm going to have a job getting this to cut off in the saw, but I think it'll work. Something else that I think is going to work brilliantly is it's actually a bigger diameter than the opening or the hole that's here in these clutch tines or these spring tines for the center of it. So what we can actually do is we can get this in the lathe, we can bore a hole through the middle of it so it sits down on the center. We can turn a feature into it so that outer race of that bearing sits in there, but we can also turn an outside feature on it up the top so that every time we take this clutch plate off and we put it on, it's actually going to have a register here on the top of that piece of aluminium to centralize it. Then I was thinking, okay, but there's a bit of play kind of around this bolt here. How am I going to register this to this? So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back in the lathe, center it off of that bearing register on the back using the dial gauge, and then put another little feature here that can match a sort of a spigot sticking out of this, so that when that goes together, that sits centrally in that puller. Then those pillars that we talked about, their centralizing location is not nearly as relevant because the disc will be getting centered, or this clutch plate will be getting centered every time off of that central register here, which will relate directly to those rivet holes, and it should give us this really nice ability to just spin this and drill it. Thank you very much to a subscriber, Ben Pillion, who sent me a message on Facebook Messenger. We've been going back and forward about a few other jobs, but he had a great idea, and I've already started working on it. We were talking about how are we going to index this exactly, through the 9 bolt holes that are here, or 9 rivets that we have to drill. And I was talking about having a pin out here that I could do, and Ben came up with a great idea. He said, why don't you CAD this up in Fusion and using your laser cutter, cut a disc with the 6 or 9 holes, should I say, marked around the outside. So I'm going to show you the drawing now. So as you can see, this is my drawing here, and I have worked out off of the center of the disc, did a bit of measuring with a clutch diaphragm, and got these 9 holes around the outside. So all we'll have to do now is laser cut that, and we can bring it back here and put it onto this, and that's going to give us our center. And then like that, all we'll do then is we'll make another little piece of aluminium that'll fit in a T-slot here, which will be a set distance away from that, and like that we can just have a pin that we drop in each time. Now I'm only going to be able to laser cut that out of plywood, but what I can do is laser cut it out of plywood and test it, make sure it works perfectly, and then we can contact our local laser cutter who can cut that out of something like 6mm stainless steel for me, and then it'll be a one-time job. We can get that on there. So Couple of things we need to do. First thing we need to do is to get this hunk of aluminium into the chop saw and let that start cutting away while we start making up the pillars to mount this on. So I want this aluminium to sit just proud of the top of these. I don't want to go much more than it, but I want it to come up a little bit. And I need to leave enough material so that I can make that register boss down in there. So if we measure this and just see off that pullers what height it is. So that makes 44 millimeters, brings me up to there. So I want about probably a 5 mil register into that, so and maybe come up maybe 2 or 3 millimeters. So I'm thinking if I cut 50 mil off of that, that's going to give me, what'll 50, yeah, okay, so that'll give me about 5 mil register down into that old bearing puller, and it'll give me about 5 millimeters proud of this, and I think that will give us enough room. So at 50 millimeters. Now looking at the end of that bar, neither end of it is straight, so we might go 52, let's say. Yeah, we'll go 52 millimeters in the saw, and that'll give me enough room to turn that face nice and true, and you know, enough space in it then that we can bring it back down to 50 millimeters and make all our features into it. Let's get that into the saw, and then we can get back over here and we can measure up for the pillars. Okay, now that's cutting away, we can leave that cutting and we can come over here and we can start making these pillars. So I found this little bit of bar stock in my bar stock selection, and I think that's going to work perfectly fine. What does it measure in at? I think it's 15. It's 5/8, so 15 millimeters, or 60 millimeters should I say. So what we want is we want 3 pillars standing up out of this with a fairly deep taper on the top of them, a hole all the way through so that we can put a bolt and a washer. So I'm thinking an M10 bolt and washer this side. So we'll drill 8.7, well 8.5 actually, yeah, because we're going M10 by 1.75, let's say. So let's drill that. We want an 8 mil hole through there, and we want to figure out what height those pillars are going to be. Now I can't easily measure to the underside of those, but what I can do is I can measure probably to the top side of that. Yeah, that'll fit in through there, and then we can just deduct. Okay, so the top side of that, well, it'll help if I had the calipers turned on. Okay, let's try again. Make a measurement to there. Okay, so that is, better start writing some of these down. What are we at there? 22, wow, 22 millimeters. Okay, so that's 22 millimeters. And then the thickness of this is what? So the thickness of this is 6 mil, I think. 6.5. Okay, so that's 6.5. That's an odd measurement. Ah, it was 7 and then they machined it. Okay, so 6.5 mil, and that was 22. Now I'm thinking if we cut these all off at 22 each, then a little bit of truing up each end and put the taper on it, then we can fine tune them in the chuck to bring them down. You know, we might actually only want it to be, depending on the taper, because we don't want these actually to stick through the hole. We want them to stick just underneath the hole. We want them to center, but we don't want to bring them through. So look, we'll cut them all off at 22. We'll bore the hole through the middle, and at least then that sort of brings us to the stage where we have, I might actually bore the hole through the middle first and then cut them all off 22, because we have less material to remove. Okay, that's what we'll do. We'll bore them through, we'll cut them all off 22, and then we'll get them set up to turn the taper on the top of it. We'll get the compound slide set up on the lathe, and we can turn the taper on it. Okay, we'll go over to the lathe, so we'll bore this through with our tap size drill, and oh, we don't go all the way through though. I'm thinking again now, we don't go all the way through because we want an M8 on one side. Okay, that's what we'll do. This is the train of thought as you go along here. You gotta try and save yourself a lot of problems. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We will drill this, the tap size for M8, which is 6.7 because M8 is 1.25, yeah. So we'll drill this 6.7 all the way through. Then we'll chop it into 22 millimeter pieces, and then we can bore halfway through one side for the M10, thread that M10, thread the other side M8, and then we can turn back the taper on the top of these, and that will give us our 3 pillars. Get them bolted onto there. Hopefully at that stage the piece of aluminium will have finished cutting in the saw, and then we can bring that in and we get that done. Right, over to the lathe. Right, so we started by facing that, doing a center drill, and now we have it drilled 6.8, which is tap size for M8. I've been trying to think about the best way to do these 4, and I think now is the time to cut them off at 22 each. Then we can do all the 10mm holes, all the drill size for M10, and then we can tap all the M8s. And then I think we'll turn that taper feature on it. So next thing is, let's chop these all off and move on then to the taper feature. Now, what I have is, I've managed now to make these 3 sort of pedestals, I suppose would be a good way to describe them. And these now can bolt on to our arrangement here, and that will allow us to hopefully get the adjustment we need to put the pressure plate in the right spot. Now I put 3 washers underneath this because I want to give myself as much adjustability in this whole arrangement as I can. So I can always take those washers out if I want at some stage. I've got them in there now, and it gives me that kind of level of adjustability. But if I want at another stage to take those out, I can, and you know, it'll allow us to get this to center up. So the idea now is that they're going to hopefully be able to center up on those sort of pin bosses, which they seem to do pretty well. One worry I have, and that's something we're going to have to check, they should be all at the same height, but oh, okay, so that one hasn't gone in, that's what it is. Okay. So we can move that around then inside there to get that all to center up, which it feels like it's doing. Now what we might do when we have this all in the milling machine is we might just run the DTI gauge all around the top to make sure they're all at the same height. And if they're not, we can use those washers then to sort of shim up and down the pillars so that we get the pillars all at the same height. Looking at it here, I think this one might just be slightly higher than the others, which is interesting. Ah, okay, there's one extra washer, that's what it is. Okay, now the top of that pullers may not be dead square either, so it might be worthwhile when we have it in the lathe giving it just one skim referencing that back surface as well. So that's going to give us that kind of a bit more accuracy as well when it comes to that. Next thing we need to try and engineer now or make is going to be that central column. So let's go and check and see if that piece has come off the saw. Now, so I just saved you the boring of the hole through that. You've seen me do that a million times before. So what I've done now is I've put a 17.5mm hole right through the center, and I just turned up the 2 front surfaces of that to get them so that they're reasonably true. The next features that we need to get in here is we need to get something to hold the outer race of the top truss bearing. So we're going to have to turn back here to get the outer race, but also in that outer race we have to think about the inner race, which has a feature here So we need to also put a recess for that feature to allow that all sit in there nice and tightly. The other feature we need to get on the top here is that outside diameter needs to come down slightly to 61 millimeters, which is the OD of that spring setup. This is, I think, 62.5 or 63 millimeters. So we need to just come back down to that 60, 61 OD on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of boring here, bring this back, and when I'm getting close to the bearing tolerance, I'm going to bring you back and just show you exactly what I'm doing. Getting that measurement there just to see what it is, and I'm getting 61 millimeters. So if we go back over to the milling machine, but he doesn't fall over. What we can see here is that I have the features turned, a recess in there for that inner feature on the bearing, and then an outer diameter for that, and it's just going to be a very light press fit in there to hold that bearing in that housing. So this outer dimension here, we want to get that down then to that 61. So what is it at the moment? At the moment, it's kind of coming in there at 63 and a half, I'd say, 63 and a half millimeters. So we want to get that down to 61. So we get a couple of passes back here. We only need to come back a small bit because when this stands up in our new fixture, the bevel spring is going to be real close to the top here. Remember, we measured down to the bevel spring, and we made this. What measurement did we make that? So that's coming in there now at 52 millimeters, and I think we measured down to the bevel spring and it was around 50 millimeters. Now we can kind of play around with all of these measurements because we have, I suppose, the washers underneath those pillars we made, so we can kind of play. We could also turn back that plate a little bit as well if we wanted a bit. So let's just turn back a small bit of this and bring it down to that 61 millimeters. And then the last thing we want to do is flip this and turn a little bit of a centering boss on the back that can lock into that triangle plate that we're using to bolt the whole assembly together and to hold that fixture. So that brings us in there at 61 on the nose. Now I'm just going to do one tiny pass here just to take that slightly under, because we don't want this to be a friction fit or anything like that. We want it to be just a slip fit so that the clutch housing or the pressure plates will just slide on easily. I'm just going to break these two edges here so they're not these real horrible sharp edges. One final dimension check just to make sure, and we are 2/100ths under the 61 mil nominal OD that we said for that spring. Just get the spring in check. It's always a good idea just to double check your measurements and make sure that, while, yeah, that's going to fit on there nicely. And it still has a nice kind of centering effect on it, so that's exactly what we want. We want that just to kind of slip on there, and that will give us a central. It's good. Just trying a different pressure plate just to make sure it's not kind of a manufacturer specific thing. No, that one feels good on there as well. So that's good. Okay, next we need to do is Flip this over and put that last feature on the back, which is that centralizing boss I wanted to put on there. And then we can go back and have a look at the whole thing building up on the milling machine. Just while I'm putting this together, I just want to take 2 minutes just to thank everybody who's been watching the videos, all of my subscribers. Thank you so much for all the support. Thank you very much to anybody who is new to the channel. You're really welcome here. I hope you enjoy it. At the moment we're doing machining, we're getting set up. Other times we do videos on minis and other times we do video on tech. So it's great to have you here and I hope you enjoy. Have a look around and see some of the other stuff. Again, thanks to our subscriber Ben who came up with the idea of the laser cutting. We got that into action. We're now at the stage where we're going to start putting this together. Don't forget guys, if you're enjoying this type of content, hit the like button. It really helps us to kind of bring you the content we know you enjoy. All right, so I've just loosely put these back together. So just to give you an idea, I did this off camera. I just put this in the lathe, gripped it very carefully here on that boss we made the last day and just skimmed up the surface of this to bring it into true. So that now these pedestals that we made can kind of slide nice and easily. So the piece we made the last day with the slot in it can go down there and that catches the T-slot in the milling machine. Get that roughly kind of central there. This then can go down and get to that bearing. Might need just a little tap with it. No, it's in there nicely. So those guys can slide around and we can catch them from underneath with a spanner. So here's the finished article of that bigger piece we made. So I just put a little profile in there, which is going to match that central boss we put in there. And we can see that mini bearing is fitting in there. Now, what I would like to do just before I put it together, finally, is I'm just going to tap that bearing down because I can see it's not sitting dead flat. So we'll just put it down into there. That fits really nicely there. And we'll get our copper hammer and a little bit of a punch and we'll just see, can we bring down that bearing housing another little bit? Bring that so it sits nice and level. And let's bring it down now. A small little bit. I made that a kind of a press fit into there so that it would sit in there nice and neatly. We might have to bring that over to the press at some stage to take it in the last little bit, but we can do that before we're finished. I'm too excited to put it together and see if it works. So it's close though, it's very close there. So I'm thinking a couple of washers like that on that inner bearing race there. And obviously we could do a greasing both of these bearings, but we're just doing a test fit here for the minute just to kind of see how it all kind of comes together. That's already feeling kind of nice and true. I'm seeing a little bit of run out there, but I think that might just be because that bearing is not sitting completely perfect. So let's just give it a bit of a pinch here on the bolt and see. Oh, that feels really good. Like I'm hauling down on that bolt now at the moment and that still's turning really quite easily in there. I think the bearing might be kind of moving back in. Now, before we actually go all the way to machining, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up pinching up those pins there, and then we're going to put a DTI gauge in the milling machine, and we're going to go around and we're going to shim those pins up and down until they're all at the exact same height, because we don't want this clutch housing not to be at the right height. But that'll be a one-time affair. We'll put the shims in there once, and once they're in, that'll be it. We'll never have to shim it up again. It'll just be a case of dropping each one on and tightening the bolts down. Okay, let's grab our housing here. So what should happen is we should be able to kind of slide those in. Might be a little bit of a fiddle. That's not too bad actually. That one in, okay. And then we're centered up there on that housing, and then we can rotate this around. I'm really happy with this. This is a really nice piece of kit. How firm that feels there. Okay, it might be moving up and down a little bit. We need to set those pin heights, but you know, proof of concept, I think we absolutely have proof of concept here. We need just a couple of bolts to go into those bosses that we made there to clamp this down properly. We need to cut our laser cut disc to come out here, make some sort of a boss here on a T-nut that we can put each one in to rotate it exactly one or rotate it exactly to the next one. I mean, you could just center punch these and nearly do it by hand because it's almost stiff enough that you could do that, but I'm still happy. I'm still thinking to myself, no, we'll go all the way. That clearance there worked really well. We still have room to kind of come up and down and still be on center on that. I'm chuffed at that. Okay, in the last video, we've run out of time today. I've already gone over time for my shooting of this video. So in the next video, which will be the final part of this, I want to cover 3 kind of things that you guys talked to me about. One, I want to get this finished, which is just going to be really shimming it up and doing a little bit of clearance and getting that laser cut disc in. The second thing I want to do is I want to put this all together before we take it apart and check how much holding power we have on this diaphragm as it currently is. Then let's get this together, drill out these bolts, take this diaphragm apart and put a second spring in there, get everything set up for the second spring and build up that clutch. So that might take 2 more videos. The next one, getting to the stage where this actually works, and then one last video of us using it and building up a clutch. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm really looking forward to hearing your comments down below, and keep coming with the positive feedback. It really helps. One last thing I'm going to try and clear up. Someone was saying to me, why don't we just get a bigger spring, for one bigger spring for this? I am working on it. It is far simpler, or far easier to say than it is to actually do that. I've rang a couple of diaphragm spring companies, and to be honest with you, if you're not putting an order in for 10,000, they're hardly even interested in talking to a little fella like me. So at the moment, this still is a better option, but well, we'll keep progressing on it and see how it goes. Anyone want to buy it? Anyone want to buy 1,000 heavier clutch diaphragms? Hit me up in the comments below. All right, see you guys in the next one.